In a busy high school hallway, the sound of lockers slamming and students chatting filled the air. Among them was a 16-year-old girl who walked with a quiet confidence that made her stand out. Her name wasn't important here. What mattered was how she carried herself. She had always been different from the crowd, someone who didn't care much about fitting in. Instead, she embraced her quirks, creativity, and individuality. Today, she wore an outfit that reflected exactly who she was, a vintage denim jacket paired with a bold statement belt covered in colorful beads. It wasn't something you'd see every day, but it was perfect for her. As she moved through the hallway, some heads turned not because they admired her style, but because they found it odd. Most people stuck to plain jeans or simple accessories, so seeing someone wear something as eye-catching as that belt was unusual. And where there's unusual, there are always those ready to comment on it. Sure enough, near the lockers stood a group of boys, laughing and joking around like they owned the place. One of them noticed her first. He pointed at her belt and smirked, nudging his friends to get their attention. "Hey, check this out," he said, loud enough for her to hear. "What is that thing? Did she make it herself, or did she dig it out of a dumpster?" The other boys burst into laughter, pointing and adding their own sarcastic remarks. Some called it ugly. Others said it looked like something a toddler would put together. The teasing echoed down the hallway, drawing glances from nearby students. For a brief moment, the girl froze. She felt heat rushing to her face, embarrassment creeping in. But instead of letting the comments crush her, she took a deep breath and turned toward the group. Her expression wasn't angry or hurt, it was calm, almost amused. With a small smile playing on her lips, she looked directly at the boy who had started the whole thing. "Jealousy doesn't suit you," she said coolly, her voice steady and clear. Then, without waiting for a response, she turned and continued walking, leaving the boy stunned and speechless. The hallway went quiet for a second before the chatter resumed. People whispered about what just happened, unsure whether to laugh or admire her bravery. Some thought it was hilarious that she'd called him out like that. Others were impressed by how unfazed she seemed, even though everyone knew the comments must have stung. As for the boy, he stood there, his smirk fading as reality sank in. He hadn't expected her to react that way. In fact, he hadn't expected her to react at all. For the rest of the day, the memory of that encounter lingered in his mind. Every time he replayed it, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of guilt and curiosity. Who was this girl? Why wasn't she affected by what others thought of her? And why did her words keep replaying in his head long after the bell rang? Little did he know, this moment would change more than just his day. It would change the way he saw the world and himself. The boy couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the hallway. He replayed the scene over and over in his mind like a movie stuck on repeat. The way she'd turned to face him with that calm smile. The way her voice didn't waver when she said those words. "Jealousy doesn't suit you." It was as if she saw right through him, cutting deeper than any insult he could have thrown back. For someone who prided himself on being quick-witted and confident, this was unsettling. Back in class, he tried to shake it off. He leaned back in his chair, pretending to listen to the teacher while secretly glancing around the room. His friends were whispering and laughing about something, probably another joke at someone else's expense. Normally, he would have joined in without a second thought, but today he hesitated. Something about the girl's response had planted a tiny seed of doubt in his mind. Was he really as funny or clever as he thought he was? Or was he just ... mean? To distract himself, he started talking about her again. Not because he felt bad, but because he wanted to prove to himself that it didn't bother him. That belt she was wearing? Seriously, who does that? He said, loud enough for his friends to hear. They chuckled, nodding along, and one of them added, "Yeah, it looked like a craft project gone wrong." But then, something unexpected happened. Another student nearby, a quiet kid who rarely spoke up, chimed in. "I don't know," he said, shrugging. "I kinda liked it. It was different. At least she's not boring like everyone else around here." The comment caught the boy off guard. He stared at the kid, unsure how to respond. Before he could say anything, someone else joined the conversation. "Honestly, I think it takes guts to wear something like that," a girl said. "I wish I had the confidence to pull off something so bold." The boy felt a lump form in his throat. What was happening? Just moments ago, he was sure everyone would agree with him. Now, people were actually defending her? Worse still, they were praising her for doing exactly what he'd made fun of. As the discussion continued, more students weighed in, sharing their thoughts. Some admitted they admired her style, while others confessed they envied her ability to stand out without caring what others thought. By the end of the day, the girl's belt had become the talk of the school, not because it was ugly, but because it symbolized something bigger: courage, individuality, and self-expression. Even teachers mentioned it casually during lessons, using it as an example of how important it is to embrace who you are. The boy sat quietly through all of this, his chest tightening with every word. He hated feeling this way, like he was on the outside looking in, watching everyone else celebrate something he'd mocked. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The image of her calm face kept flashing in his mind. Why did she have such an impact on him? Why couldn't he stop thinking about her? And most importantly, why did he feel guilty? Guilt wasn't something he was used to feeling. He'd teased plenty of people before, and it had never bothered him this much. But there was something about her, something he couldn't quite put into words. That made him question everything. The next morning, he walked into school feeling uneasy. He avoided eye contact with anyone, afraid they might bring up the belt again. During lunch, he noticed her sitting with her best friend under a tree outside. They were laughing and chatting like nothing had happened. Watching her from afar, he realized she seemed completely unaffected by the whole situation. She wasn't sulking or avoiding people. She was just being herself, as if none of the teasing mattered. Curiosity got the better of him, and he found himself eavesdropping on their conversation. They were talking about how hard it was to stay true to yourself when everyone else wanted you to conform. He heard her admit that while she acted brave, the teasing sometimes got to her. But she refused to let fear dictate who she was. Those words hit him like a punch to the gut. Here she was, admitting she wasn't invincible, yet she still chose to rise above the negativity. Meanwhile, he was hiding behind sarcasm and jokes, afraid to show vulnerability. For the first time, he saw her not as a target for ridicule, but as a person, a real, complex human being with feelings and struggles. He realized that his laughter hadn't just been harmless fun. It had hurt her. And that realization made him feel worse than anything else ever had. After school, he lingered near the entrance, waiting for her to come out. When she finally appeared, he stepped forward nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Hey, I wanted to say sorry for laughing at your belt yesterday. It was wrong of me." She stopped in her tracks, clearly surprised by his sudden apology. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to figure out whether he was being sincere. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said simply, her tone neutral. Encouraged by her response, he pressed on. "I guess I was just jealous," he admitted, looking down at his shoes. "You're really brave for wearing whatever makes you happy. I'm not sure I could do that." Her expression softened, and she gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Thanks for apologizing," she said. "It means a lot." As she walked away, he stood there, feeling a strange mix of relief and determination. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was starting to understand what truly mattered. The apology felt like a weight lifted off his shoulders, but it wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. Over the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He kept replaying their brief conversation in his mind, wondering if she truly believed his apology or if she thought it was just another attempt to save face. Either way, he knew he had to prove himself. He didn't want to be the guy who said sorry and then went back to being the same person he'd always been. Something inside him had shifted, and he wanted to change for real. It started small. He began noticing little things about her that he'd never paid attention to before, like how she always seemed to have a sketchbook tucked under her arm, filled with doodles and designs, or how she would sometimes hum softly to herself while walking between classes. She didn't try to blend into the background like so many others did. Instead, she stood out in ways that made people curious. Some admired her for it, while others still whispered behind her back, but she didn't seem to care either way. Her confidence was magnetic, even if she didn't realize it. One afternoon, he found himself lingering near her usual spot outside during lunch. She was sitting with her best friend again, talking animatedly about something. He hesitated, unsure whether he should approach her or leave her alone. But before he could decide, she glanced up and noticed him standing there awkwardly. For a moment, they locked eyes and he felt his cheeks flush. Then, without missing a beat, she waved him over. "Hey," she said casually, patting the grass beside her. "What's up?" He sat down hesitantly, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look. Her friend raised an eyebrow at him but didn't say anything, giving him a chance to speak. Nothing much," he mumbled, picking at the grass nervously. I wanted to ask you something." She tilted her head, intrigued. "Go ahead." Taking a deep breath, he blurted out, "Where do you get your ideas for your outfits? They're always so unique." Her friend snorted, clearly amused by the question, but she smiled warmly. "Oh, thanks. Most of my stuff is inspired by my grandma. She taught me how to sew when I was little, and we used to make clothes together. All the time. It's kind of our thing." "That's really cool," he said, genuinely impressed. "You guys must be close." "We were," she replied, her voice softening. "She passed away last year, but I still feel like she's with me whenever I create something new. It's my way of keeping her memory alive, you know?" He nodded slowly, feeling a lump form in his throat. He hadn't expected her answer to hit him so hard. Losing someone important, it was something he could relate to, though he rarely talked about it. His dad had left when he was younger, and ever since, he'd struggled to figure out where he fit in. Maybe that's why he spent so much time trying to impress his friends, cracking jokes and acting tough. If he could make them laugh, maybe they wouldn't see how lost he really felt. They talked for a while longer, sharing bits and pieces of their lives. By the time the bell rang, he realized he hadn't felt this comfortable around anyone in ages. There was no judgment, no pressure to pretend he could just be himself. And for once, that felt okay. Over the next few weeks, their conversations became more frequent. At first, it was just casual hellos in the hallway or quick chats after class. But soon, they started spending time together outside of school too. She introduced him to her favorite thrift stores, showing him how to find hidden gems among racks of old clothes. He, in turn, shared his love for music, playing guitar for her one evening when she came over to his house. They discovered they had more in common than either of them had expected, like their shared love for classic movies and their mutual dislike for pineapple on pizza. He also learned to see the world differently. She had a way of finding beauty in the smallest things, whether it was the pattern on a leaf or the colors of a sunset. She encouraged him to express himself too, pushing him to step out of his comfort zone. One day, she handed him a bright red shirt covered in palm trees and dared him to wear it to school. He laughed at first, thinking she was joking, but when she insisted, he decided to give it a shot. To his surprise, no one made fun of him. In fact, some of his friends complimented him on taking a risk. As their friendship grew, so did his perspective. He started paying less attention to what others thought of him and more to how he felt about himself. He stopped using sarcasm as a shield and began opening up about his feelings instead. For the first time, he felt like he was living authentically, rather than pretending to be someone he wasn't. Their bond didn't go unnoticed. His group of friends who had once teased her mercilessly began warming up to her too. At first, they were skeptical, unsure what to make of her quirky style and bold personality. But as they got to know her, they realized she wasn't just different, she was inspiring. Slowly, the dynamic within the group shifted. Instead of mocking people for standing out, they started celebrating individuality. Even the boy who had once laughed at her belt found himself encouraging others to embrace who they were. One day, as they walked home from school together, she turned to him with a grin. "You've changed, you know that?" He looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're not the same guy who made fun of my belt a few months ago. You actually listen now. You're kinder, braver, better." Her words caught him off guard, but they also filled him with pride. He knew he still had a long way to go, but hearing her say that meant everything. "Thanks," he said softly. "You're the one who helped me see things differently." She shrugged, brushing off the compliment like it was nothing, but he could tell she was pleased. As they continued walking, he couldn't help but smile. Life had thrown him a curveball the day he decided to laugh at her belt, and somehow it had led him straight to one of the most meaningful friendships he'd ever had. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened in ways neither of them could have predicted. At first, it was just small moments, sharing laughs over silly inside jokes, exchanging playlists of songs they both loved, or sitting quietly together when words weren't needed. But soon, those little moments grew into something bigger. They became each other's support system, someone to lean on when life got tough. And for him, that connection meant more than he ever thought possible. One day, she invited him to join her and her best friend at an art fair downtown. He hesitated at first. It wasn't really his scene, but curiosity got the better of him. The fair was buzzing with energy, filled with colorful stalls showcasing handmade jewelry, paintings, sculptures, and clothing. Everywhere he looked, people were expressing themselves through their creations. It felt like stepping into a world where being different wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. She led him from stall to stall, pointing out pieces she loved and explaining why they resonated with her. "See this?" she said, holding up a scarf covered in intricate patterns. "It reminds me of my grandma's embroidery. She used to make things like this all the time." He nodded, genuinely interested. For so long, he dismissed anything artistic as boring or pointless. But seeing how passionate she was about it made him want to understand. He even bought a small painting, a vibrant abstract piece that reminded him of her bold personality. When he showed it to her, she grinned. "I didn't think you had it in you," she teased. "I'm full of surprises." He shot back with a smirk. The more time they spent together, the more he realized how much she inspired him. Her creativity wasn't limited to fashion. It spilled over into everything she did. Whether it was redecorating her room with thrift store finds or coming up with quirky ideas for school projects, she approached life with a sense of adventure that was contagious. Slowly but surely, she started nudging him out of his comfort zone too. One evening, while hanging out at her house, she handed him a plain white t-shirt and a set of fabric paints. "Your turn," she said, grinning mischievously. "Let's see what you can create." He stared at the blank shirt, unsure where to start. "What if I mess it up?" "You won't," she assured him. "Just paint whatever comes to mind. Don't overthink it." Reluctantly, he picked up a brush and dipped it into the paint. At first, his strokes were hesitant, awkward even. But as he kept going, something clicked. He started adding shapes and colors, letting his imagination take over. By the time he finished, the shirt was a chaotic mix of blues, greens, and yellows, with swirls and lines that didn't quite match up. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. When he held it up for her to see, she clapped enthusiastically. "That's amazing," she exclaimed. "You should totally wear it to school tomorrow." "Are you kidding?" "Everyone will laugh," he said, laughing nervously himself. "So what if they do?" she countered. "It's not about them, it's about you. Besides, I'll be right there with you." Her confidence gave him courage. The next day, he wore the shirt to school, bracing himself for snarky comments. To his surprise, most people didn't say anything negative. Some even complimented him, saying it looked cool and unique. His friends, who once would have mocked him for wearing something so unconventional, now joked about wanting custom designs of their own. Even the teachers noticed, with one of them praising him for embracing creativity. That experience marked a turning point for him. He began experimenting more, not just with his clothes, but with his attitude toward life. He started speaking up in class, sharing his opinions even when he wasn't sure anyone would agree. He joined clubs he'd never considered before, like the photography club, where he discovered a hidden talent for capturing candid moments. Each step forward pushed him further away from the person he used to be, the guy who hid behind sarcasm and jokes because he was afraid to be vulnerable. His transformation didn't go unnoticed by others. People who barely knew him before started approaching him, asking questions or striking up conversations. Some admitted they admired how he'd changed, while others simply seemed curious about what had sparked the shift. What they didn't realize was that none of it would have happened without her. She didn't just encourage him to try new things. She showed him that it was okay to be imperfect, to fail, to stand out. In doing so, she helped him rediscover parts of himself he'd forgotten or maybe never truly known. Their bond also brought unexpected changes to his group of friends. At first, they were wary of her influence, unsure what to make of her quirky style and unapologetic confidence. But as they got to know her better, they began to see her for who she really was: kind, genuine, and fiercely loyal. Slowly, their dynamic shifted. Conversations that once revolved around teasing or mocking others transformed into discussions about hobbies, dreams, and personal growth. Even the boy who had laughed at her belt found himself defending her when someone else made a rude comment. One afternoon, during lunch, his friend leaned over and whispered, "You've changed, man." Like in a good way. He shrugged, smiling faintly. Maybe we all have. By senior year, the ripple effect of their friendship was undeniable. The hallways no longer buzzed with whispers and judgmental stares. Instead, students embraced their differences, using them as opportunities to connect rather than divide. Fashion trends became less about fitting in and more about standing out. Art projects took center stage at school events, with everyone encouraged to showcase their talents. And at the heart of it all was her, the girl with the bold belt who refused to conform. Prom night arrived, and the entire school buzzed with excitement. Everyone dressed to impress, eager to celebrate the end of an era. As he stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come since that fateful day in the hallway. Back then, he'd been so focused on tearing others down to build himself up. Now he understood that true strength came from lifting others and yourself up instead. When he arrived at the venue, he scanned the crowd, looking for her. It didn't take long to spot her. She stood near the entrance, dazzling in a handmade dress covered in intricate beadwork, a nod to her signature style. Around her neck hung a necklace she'd designed herself, its vibrant colors catching the light with every move she made. Heads turned as she walked past, not because she was trying to draw attention, but because she naturally commanded it. She waved him over, her smile lighting up the room. "Hey," she said, pulling him into a quick hug. "You clean up nice." "So, do you?" he replied, returning her grin. "That dress is incredible." "Thanks," she said, twirling playfully. "Made it myself, obviously." They danced under the twinkling lights, surrounded by classmates who now celebrated individuality rather than shying away from it. As the music played on, he leaned over and whispered, "You know, I owe you a lot." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh yeah? For what?" "For showing me what real confidence looks like," he said sincerely, "and for helping me find mine." Her expression softened, and she gave him a knowing smile. "Any time." In that moment, surrounded by laughter, music, and the glow of newfound friendships, he realized something important. Life wasn't about avoiding mistakes or blending in, it was about learning from those mistakes, embracing your uniqueness, and inspiring others to do the same. And sometimes all it took was one bold choice, one colorful belt to set everything in motion. The night of prom was magical, but the real magic wasn't in the decorations, the music, or even the outfits. It was in the way people had changed, the subtle yet profound shift that had taken place over the past year. For so long, the school had been a place where conformity ruled and standing out felt like walking on thin ice. But now, as he looked around at the crowd dancing under the twinkling lights, he saw something different. He saw students who weren't afraid to be themselves. Anymore. She stood near him, laughing with her friends, her handmade dress shimmering as she moved. Every time someone complimented her outfit, she'd thank them warmly, her smile genuine and unforced. She didn't need validation from others. She already knew she was enough, but it was clear how much joy those compliments brought her. Watching her interact with everyone, he realized just how much she had influenced not only him but the entire school. Her boldness, her refusal to shrink herself for anyone, had sparked a chain reaction. People had started embracing their quirks, their passions, their imperfections. And in doing so, they'd created a space where everyone could breathe a little easier. As the hours passed, the DJ played slower songs and couples began pairing off to dance. He hesitated for a moment before stepping toward her. "Mind if I cut in?" he asked, nodding toward the makeshift dance floor. She laughed softly. "I didn't think you were much of a slow dance kind of guy. I'm full of surprises, remember?" he said, offering his hand. She took it, and they stepped onto the floor together. As they swayed to the music, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led them here. Who would have thought that a single comment about a belt could change so much? Back then, he'd been clueless, just another kid trying to fit in by tearing others down. He used to think being popular meant having power. But now he understood that true strength came from lifting others up instead of knocking them down. "You're quiet tonight," she said after a while, tilting her head to look at him. "What's going on in that head of yours?" He smiled faintly. "Just thinking about how far we've come. You know, this whole thing started because of you." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Because of me? How do you figure that?" "Well," he began, choosing his words carefully, "if you hadn't worn that belt and called me out when I laughed at it, I don't think I would have ever realized how much I needed to change. You made me see things differently. You showed me what it means to be brave, to be yourself no matter what anyone else thinks." Her expression softened, and she gave him a small, knowing smile. "I didn't do anything special. I just lived my life the way I always have. If anything, you did the hard work. Changing isn't easy, especially when you're used to doing things one way your whole life. But you didn't. You opened yourself up to new ideas, new ways of thinking. That takes guts. He shook his head, humbled by her response. Maybe, but none of it would have happened without you pushing me. Honestly, I don't know where I'd be right now if it weren't for you. They danced in silence for a few moments, letting the music fill the space between them. Then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. You know, I wasn't always as confident as I seem. There were days when the teasing got to me, when I wondered if maybe everyone was right, that I should just blend in and stop drawing attention to myself. But then I remembered why I started dressing this way in the first place. It's not about being loud or flashy for the sake of it. It's about honoring who I am, staying true to myself no matter what. Her words struck a chord deep within. He'd spent so much of his life pretending to be someone he wasn't, someone cooler, funnier, more likable. But in trying to win approval from others, he'd lost sight of who he truly was. Thanks to her, he was finally learning to embrace himself, flaws and all. When the song ended, they stepped off the dance floor and found a quiet corner to sit. Around them, the party carried on, but for a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes scanning the crowd. It's funny, she said after a pause. A year ago, I never imagined I'd end up here surrounded by people who actually get me, who celebrate the things that make me different instead of mocking them. And honestly, I have you to thank for that too. Me? He asked, surprised. How? Because you listened, she explained. When most people would have brushed me off or kept making fun of me, you chose to listen. You let me show you a different perspective, and you didn't shut me out. That meant a lot. He nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that captured how grateful he was for everything she'd done for him. But words failed him, so instead, he simply said, "Thank you." She smiled, squeezing his hand briefly before turning her attention back to the party. The rest of the night flew by in a blur of laughter, music, and memories. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, he found himself reflecting on how much had changed, not just in him, but in everyone around him. The boy who once laughed at her belt had become one of her biggest supporters, someone who championed individuality and encouraged others to do the same. And the girl who wore that belt? She remained exactly who she'd always been, fearless, authentic, and unapologetically herself. By the time the last song played, he knew this wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. They had both grown so much over the past year, and he couldn't wait to see where life would take them next. One thing was certain, though, wherever they went, they'd carry the lessons they'd learned with them. Lessons about courage, kindness, and the importance of staying true to yourself even when it feels like the world is telling you to be someone else. As they left the venue together, the cool night air wrapping around them, she turned to him with a grin. So, what's next for you? Any big plans? He shrugged, returning her smile. Not sure yet. But whatever happens, I know I'll face it better because of you. She laughed, shaking her head. Stop being such a sap. Let's go get some late-night fries instead. And with that, they walked off into the night, ready to take on whatever came their way together.